It's a classic vehicle. We've got some World War II vehicles out today, as well as a modern one. But this vehicle is one of those ones you'll have seen in all the movies, all over the place. But it's so important for an armoured force to have other types of vehicles with it. You don't just want your tanks, you need your logistics, and you need your liaison vehicles as well. And this is a famous vehicle from the Second World War. We all know it as the Jeep. The Americans called it a quarter-tonner. It was designed with the idea that it might be used for reconnaissance, find out where the enemy are. It might have been used for taking people around behind the lines, liaison they call that, getting people from A to B. It was also going to be converted into a huge number of roles. You could put ambulance versions, you could put stretchers on it. They put armoured shields on it, they put machine guns on the top of it, all sorts of things. And it's considered by many an American design classic. It was put together from a number of ideas. It wasn't just one person or one company. The Americans in the 20s and 30s had experimented with an idea they're going to need a small, lightweight vehicle. They saw what Britain did in 1928. We took the Austin 7 cars up on Salisbury Plain. Soldiers literally could pick up that car, put it over the other side of the wall. It was that small and light, and the Americans liked that idea. With the Jeep, a number of companies come together, American Banter, a number of smaller manufacturers alongside Ford and GMC, and this design ends up going into mass production in America from 1941 onwards. 650,000 Jeeps are made. And why numbers are important, we'll see that in a moment with tanks and other vehicles. It means if this thing breaks down or goes wrong, it's easy to repair. They could actually literally chip it on its side to get at the bottom without damaging the vehicle at all. But 650,000, it means the Americans can give it to us, we can give it to Commonwealth countries. It's used by the Russians, by lots of countries all around the world in the Second World War, and of course, because there's so many spare parts, it's out there, it's used for decades after the war as well. This particular one was made in France after World War II. It's what they call a Hotchkiss version. If you're going to buy a Jeep for yourself, you might want a wartime one. Actually, the post-war French ones have got a better build standard. It's got thicker metal on it, it'll last longer. That's because they didn't have the pressures of wartime production when they were building them from about 1947 onwards. So what's that got to do with tanks? Well, as I say, it might even be running a neutral up to the vehicle. It might be taking your officer to an orders group. You need a range of different types of vehicles because you don't want to be using your tank until you absolutely have to. Why is that? That's because tanks wear out quickly. You'll do anything with other types of vehicles before deploying your tanks. Now, one of the roles on the battlefield is finding out where the enemy is, what they're up to. And to do that, you might have used a Jeep, but it's not bulletproof. This fella here, this is something called the Daimler Dingo. It's small, it's fast, it's got an inch of armour plate on the front, and you can go using that vehicle at up to 55 miles an hour on the open road. That's fast for a 3-ton vehicle. It's got a 5-speed gearbox. You can whip your way through the gears there. It's what they call a pre-selector gearboxes. If you can remember the old London Routemaster buses, you saw the driver used to turn a knob on his next to his where his steering wheel was. You put a lever into the gear you want to go into, you stamp on the clutch. You don't ease the clutch up and it goes straight in that gear. And that's great on the battlefield. It's relatively quiet, it's small, so you're harder to see, and you're going to be harder to hit as well as a target. Now, the Dingo was designed just before World War II in Britain. Some of you, if you're my generation, you all seem to learn that the Germans had the better stuff, the cooler stuff. Not always. This is a classic example of a really good British design vehicle that whenever the Germans captured it, they put it into service because they didn't have anything the equivalent to this, and it went on in service. 6,500 of these were made, and they were still in service up to the 1960s in the British Army. Other countries carried on using them much later because it's perfect for its role. Quiet, listen to this. Imagine that's going to be sneaking up on you somewhere. It's small, so that bit about harder to pick up. It would carry a Bren gun, but to be honest, that Bren gun was pretty much there for a bit of self-confidence for the crew. If you bump into the enemy, quick burst of machine gun fire, and you've got 5 reverse gears to get you out of trouble just as quick. And you think about that, if you're reconnaissance, driving down a narrow lane like all around here in Dorset, you meet the enemy coming down the way, you don't want to be faffing around doing a 3-point turn in the middle of the road. Driver can just put that in reverse and go just as fast backwards as he was going forwards. Now the Dingo, it's you can see it's a smallish little vehicle, but very successful nonetheless. But on that score as well, they ended up thinking, should we build another version that's a bit bigger? We'll see one of those later in our display. They end up building almost like the Mummy or the Daddy vehicle of this one, and they call that the Daimler armoured car. So Daimler Dingo, made by the Daimler company. It was actually designed as another one of these vehicles. A few people had their input before the war, but we'll see its big brother, as it were, a bit later on. Now, every time you see something with tracks, there's a bit of a tendency to call it a tank, but I think most of us here, you'd probably look at that one and say it's obviously not a tank. It hasn't got a turret on it. This is a vehicle that the military call an APC, or Armoured Personnel Carrier. And the idea here is what you've got that need on the battlefield to take soldiers forward to where the fighting is. Now behind the line, that's fine, just using big trucks, etc. to manoeuvre them around. But on an open battlefield, bullets, shells, all sorts of things going on, they need protection. Now in Britain, we realised that even in the First World War, we've just come up with a tank. One of the first next generation vehicles we come up with, in 1918, we come up with the Mark 9, a walking great tank vehicle, 30 soldiers could get in the back of it to go forward into action. Now we never actually used that vehicle, but after World War II they do experiments with half tracks, and then from the 45 onwards, pretty much every country that builds a tank builds a box on tracks to carry soldiers into battle with. And this is a British one from the 1960s, still in service to this day. Now a little bit earlier today we recruited some people out in the audience, and they're in the back of this vehicle. We've given them a helmet and a gun. There they are, and they're going to give them a wave. They are literally done a little 5-10 minutes training before the display, and they're going to show us how a vehicle like this might be used in a combat situation. Now this isn't a World War II vehicle. As I mentioned, it goes into service in the 1960s, that era we call the Cold War. Cold War because it never becomes a hot war. There's no actual fighting in it, or certainly not in Europe at the time. We knew we needed armoured infantry to keep up with the tanks. It's got to be small as possible again. It's got to be relatively well armoured, but not as thickly armoured as a tank. It's not there for taking on. It doesn't fight other vehicles. They call this a battle taxi. It delivers those soldiers with enough protection to keep them safe, and they jump out the rear door at the back where they get to the place where the fighting's going on. They don't actually fight from inside the vehicle, even though they can put their heads out the top. Driver's in the front, you can see with a square hatch, he's got 2 levers in front of him. If he wants to turn left, he pulls back the left lever, it brakes, it slows the track as it were on the left-hand side, the other side keeps turning, and it pushes you round the corner. If you pull the right lever, you turn right, left lever left, both levers back together. With any luck, you should come to a stop. But if you can imagine, if you're driving using your brakes, because that's what you're doing most of the time, that's why you'll see big track vehicles, when they go around our arena, they tend to turn corners like the edge of a 50p piece. So it's a straight line, pull on the stick, change the angle, another straight line, pull on the stick, change the angle. If you keep pulling on that stick the whole time, you can imagine your brakes might get a bit hot and end up failing. On the front of this vehicle, those stubby tubes you can see on a lot of armoured vehicles in the museum, sometimes on turrets. Those tubes contain a smoke grenade. It's about the size of a Coke can. And the idea there is you come under attack at all, press a button, out fires a pattern of smoke grenades, big smoke screen, it means you're hidden from the enemy, so you can back off or reposition without them seeing you. You can imagine that's quite an important thing to have on the battlefield. Commander sits behind, sometimes with a machine gun, infantry sections on bench seats facing inwards on the back. And it's such a simple vehicle, again, a bit like the Jeep, they use it for lots of things. Some are made into ambulance, some carry engineer equipment, some are used as command posts. And even though it was made in the 60s, we've still got some of these in service in the army today. So the young soldiers serving in them, quite often the vehicle is well over twice their age. And that's because, again, sometimes if the military gets something that works, you'll keep it in service. Sometimes it's because you can't afford anything better. Now, many vehicles today, depending on where they're being deployed, that depends on what you do or what you add to the vehicle. This one's for service in the Middle East. On the back, there's an air conditioning unit that's been bolted to it to keep the soldiers inside nice and cool. So they're keeping fit enough to fight. You imagine in a metal box in the Middle East, you're going to be cooked quite quickly. So little things like that, not like Thunderbirds, you add things to vehicles depending on the nature of the mission. So I think we can agree this one looks like a proper tank this time. This is an American tank, the Sherman from World War II. If we've got any tank fans out there, you've read books and seen documentaries on this. Some people say, oh, it wasn't that good, was it? Certainly wasn't like a Panther or a German Tiger. It wasn't meant to be. The Americans, quite understandably, they'd done some designs in the 20s and 30s with different components. They didn't have a big army in the 20s and 30s, nothing like they are today. But when war came, they knew they were going to throw money at the problem. And they were also going to use their car industry, and that's exactly what they do. They go to Chrysler, they go to Henry Ford, they look at building tanks. Relatively simply, doesn't have to be the best in the world, but as long as it's good enough is the phrase they use, and as long as they can make enough of them. And one of the things the American automotive industry does is it makes the tank production enormous, because they're used to making lots and lots of cars on that Henry Ford system. Let's do the same for tanks. 49,000 German tanks are made in World War II. And to give you an idea, the British Army at the moment's got about 250 tanks in service just now. And of those, it says probably half that number work on any given day. So you start seeing an idea of scale. This is an enormously produced vehicle. And because they made so many of them, they ended up having to use at least 3 different main types of engines. This particular one, this is a later war Sherman, it's got a diesel engine in it, it's called M4A2, and in the back there's a twin diesel. Diesel's better for tank crews because it's harder to set on fire, and the engines can tend to take you a bit further than usual. Now, those of you who've seen the Brad Pitt War movie, yes, you may recognise this one. This is the one that we lent to the film, and it's in that movie Fury. This is the hero tank that plays a key role, and of course in the museum is we've got our Tiger tank, which was also on the movie set about 10 years ago. That was 2013 that film was made. We've kept Fury looking like this because the props department put all the bits and pieces on Many of our tanks, of course, inside the museum don't look necessarily what they look like when they were out fighting them, or after years of being stripped to bits or sitting in a scrapyard, etc., or parade ground finish. They're all different to when it goes into action. So often soldiers will add things to a tank, and that's what the film set people did for our tank here. The gun on it, that's what a tank's all about, is taking that gun into action to get a good fire position. The Sherman starts the war with a 75mm gun. What's that mean? Size of the hole at the end of the barrel, 7.5 centimetres across, medium velocity. The rounds come out with a medium amount of force. That's because they thought the Sherman was going to be going through the gap in a front line, exploiting, using its manoeuvre. The trouble was, what if the enemy tanks are coming the other way and they've got a better gun on, or thicker armour? So from about late 1942, the Americans start pushing for a bigger gun, and that's on this tank. It's a 76mm gun, so 1mm difference, the size of the hole at the end of the barrel, but because it's long and it's called high velocity, it fires a round out with an enormous amount of welly behind it. And what you're really doing is to knock out another tank, is firing a bit of dense metal like tungsten, twice the density of steel, firing with enough kinetic energy, enough welly behind it to smash through the enemy's armour. And that's why they added this bigger gun about halfway through the war. Still wasn't a match for some of those bigger tanks you can see inside, the Panther, the Tiger, the King Tiger, but it was better. And there was a lot of these. That's the important thing. As I mentioned earlier, huge numbers of Shermans, which means they can tend to flood the battlefield, just like they do in that Fury movie. Inside the vehicle, there's a crew of 5, 3 in the turret, 2 down the front. Commander obviously looking out for where to go. He tells the driver, you can see the driver's got his head out of the hatch at the moment, 2 levers again in front of him for steering. If he comes in under fire, like many vehicles, he pulls a lever, seat drops down, and he looks out of a glass periscope to see where he's going. On the other side is a barrel machine gunner. In many vehicles, they also operate the radio. 3 in the turret. On the other side from the commander is the loader. They need a bit of room to put those rounds in the breech, and sitting in the front section of the turret is the gunner, the person who's aiming that 76mm gun, or the machine gun that's next to it, onto the target. And as I mentioned, these things made in large numbers, and because of that, there was many left after World War II. Lots of countries start their post-war armies using American kit. Even the Russians in World War II were using the Sherman, and back then, they were quite happy to admit they really liked it. It was reliable. That meant if you were a tank crew, you had a good night's sleep. So a great all-round tank. And we're lucky here at the museum. If you're spotting around a bit later on in the museum, you'll see we've got the older Sherman, Michael, number 2 off the production line, inside on display in our new gallery. And you'll also see versions of the Sherman in there that we converted in Britain. So some to act as to explode mines up in front of them. Other versions, we've got the type they used on D-Day that float ashore with propellers on the back, ready for the D-Day landing. So it was a tank, again, just because of those numbers, we could end up developing into lots of other areas. Sherman, and it takes the drive to the front where the gearbox is. The only 2 wheels powered by the engine are the ones on the front with the teeth in. The wheels on the track on the ground, they're just spreading out the weight. The wheel at the back is just keeping the track nice and tense. So if you want to stop a tank, break one of the tracks. That's what they call a mobility kill when they're trying to do that. So there's our Sherman. Throughout the summer, we try and run different vehicles at different times, because obviously these are getting old, a lot of these vehicles. Oh, hang on, look like have our Royal Ruritanians have appeared? Does that look like one of the bad guys having a pop at our Sherman there? Looks like, oh, there we go. Right, our Royal Ruritanians have turned up. You you're being fast asleep. You're supposed to be telling me things like that. So there's the Ruritanian. Now that is the Ruritanian flag that's gone up on the mound, that very important position there that we know they're after. And there's all the vehicles that we've been showing off. They're now dispersing. You never want to keep your vehicles together if you come under attack. Think about what you've been seeing recently in Ukraine. Long rows of tanks being picked off one at a time, etc. So disperse your vehicles if you come under attack. Don't stay together. What they're going to be thinking of now is that commander who's going to think, what's the best way now of taking back on that Ruritanian position? Really important to know what you're up against. Now what have we got? Oh, hang on, Ruritanians have got a vehicle as well. This is a vehicle, evidently the Ruritanians, like many countries, they get their vehicles nowadays from all around the world. That's a British design vehicle. That's that Big Brother vehicle I was telling you about for the Dingo, the little scout car. They get the same shaped hull, slightly larger, put a turret on the top, and what they call a 2-pounder gun. Really annoyingly, in Britain in World War II, we converted from calling guns the weight of metal shot they fired, 2 pounds in our weight, into the size of the hull at the end of the barrel. So we call this a 2-pounder. Actually, it's about 47 millimetres the size of the hull. So there's the Ruritanians, ugly lot as you can see, and they have captured that important position behind us there. Now let's have a think. Who was paying attention a bit earlier on? What would an armoured force commander need to do in a situation like this if he's going to capture it back? Come on, someone was paying attention? Make a cup of tea? No, we're talking about the army, not the RAF. Come on, what are we going to do? There you go, someone's there. They'd send out their reconnaissance vehicle, wouldn't they? They need to know where are those Ruritanians. Before we commit our tank, what's the best way of going forward? How can we attack them? Can we use things like our artillery support? Let's keep those Ruritanians busy as we're working out our own plans. Don't let them settle at all. Keep them on the go. And of course, in this day and age, the other thing we've got all sorts of information, spies, zones up, get the words out, spy satellites up in the air, we've got things like unmanned drones, but still the best information is someone looking through their binoculars, using a radio, giving first-hand information back about what's going on the battlefield. At the moment it looks like there's only one Ruritanian up there with his rocket-propelled granite launcher. I think he's got, or bazooka is it, he's got there. But down the other end of the field, to take them on, there's our 432 with our infantry. They've debussed, or that's like deployed as it were, out the back of the vehicle. They're lining up there for their section attack. At least I hope they're lining up for their section attack there. Just working out what's going on down the far end. Oh, yeah, we've got a mortar, so they're putting in some mortar fire for a bit of smoke, laying that smoke down as well, because as we said earlier, that means it can be hidden. Keeps the enemy position occupied, keeps their heads down as we work out what we're going to be doing in terms of our attack. And you can see there now the Sherman tanks deploying as well. You manoeuvre, you try and choreograph these things together so that again the enemy don't have opportunities of picking on one part of your plan. So there's the smoke again going down, getting blown away, which is why again you need plenty of smoke rounds if you're putting them down. But our Sherman's deploying, coming round to take on the Ruritanian Dingo there. Oh, nice we've got the petrol dump. Now at the far end there, if you look, our infantry, you always need your infantry with you as well. There's our volunteers working their way across what they call a pepper pot attack, section at a time going forward. Oh, got a hit there on the container armoured car, the Ruritanians. One section forward, the other section moves forward. Very important, you don't run in front of your base and get shot up the backside. They call that friendly fire, as most unfriendly fire goes. But there they are, they're working their way to where they think that Ruritanian position is, on the top of the mountain there. Section at a time, a bit of fitness training I think required by one or two of the volunteers. I think they've got the enemy, oh look at that, pathetic, he's given up already. So And there's that Ruritanian they've taken on there. And the Daimler Armoured car with the Ruritanians in there. He's thrown in the towel as well. That looks like his underwear actually. So he's surrendered as well. And there we are. Union flag back up. You can all sleep safely in your beds tonight. Now, well done to the volunteers, they have about 10 minutes training just before the display, so very well done for them. So what we do for you now, ladies and gentlemen, fear not, the Ruritanians will be taken into custody. We'll clear the vehicles from the field in just a second. As I mentioned, down the far end there, you can go and have a closer look at these vehicles when they park up. Do just remember one or two of those exhausts are going to be hot. Ask the crews if you want to go and have a chat or whatever down there. That Vehicle Conservation Centre will be open for a couple of hours after lunch, so you can have a look at some of the vehicles that aren't on display at the moment, and the rides vehicle will get going again in about 10 minutes time. Tickets, as I said, from front reception. So I do hope the weather stays nice for you if you are down here on holiday in Dorset, and please enjoy the rest of your day here at the Tank Museum. Thanks very much indeed.
You get it all on, did you?
Yeah.